Now, our first guest of the evening took up a challenge of fasting for 3 days in Ramadan.
But he's not Muslim, but still found the experience truly inspirational. Welcome to the show, Graham Alcott.
Hey, Graham!
Welcome to the show, Graham. Great to have you here.
Good to be here.
Graham, why?
Why?
Question. We have to do it for 30 days because we have to, and because it's a command from our creator. We're happy to do it, but you don't. So why? Why are you doing
First
it?
question straight in with a why, right?
Yeah,
so
why?
all of this year I run a company called Think Productive, and we do productivity training.
Mm-hmm.
So all year I've been doing monthly extreme productivity experiments. So things like making decisions by the throw of a dice, things like only checking email on Fridays. And the one for the month of July was called Fuel. So it's all about how nutrition affects your productivity, how nutrition affects the brain's performance, and so on. My friends over at productivemuslim.com, who we do some work with, suggested, well, if you're doing this experiment about fuel, why don't you try fasting as part of that? So the initial idea was that I'd do a couple of weeks of using a kind of optimum diet for productivity and then contrast that with 3 days of fasting. Mohammed at Productive Muslim said, why don't you do a day? And I said, well, a day doesn't really feel long enough. And it's also, Mohammed didn't want me to do like a week or a month or whatever. So we just kind of settled on this idea of 3 days.
And were you comfortable with that number?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I quite like to challenge myself and do, different things and interesting things. And I was daunted by it. Before I started, I was really worried about how I was going to react to it. I was kind of anxious about whether I'd faint or something. It was.
But
it
how's
felt
it,
like a difficult thing.
well, how's it been so far? First day, tell
So
us.
the first day was just lots of hunger pangs. I think because I eat things like have sugar in my tea and all that sort of stuff. So there's this kind of sugar withdrawal thing that for me was probably the big problem. And then I think as it went on, so I got to like the second and third day.
So before you go on to the second and third day, I just want to cover some of the bits that you wrote in your diary. 'Cause
Okay.
you kept the diary, didn't you?
So I kept a blog, and
You
so the blog was on our website, but then syndicated on productivemuslim.com.
It's really interesting. 'Cause for day one, you said for you to recognise what a huge and profound thing it is to undertake something like this. So what did you mean by that exactly?
Well, it's pretty profound to go without food for the whole day, and it's a big sacrifice, and obviously you're saying we do this because we have to, but there's a discipline and something quite profound about undertaking that, which was I just found quite interesting.
So you also said I can also see immediately how the sacrifice of the day-to-day helps people to experience their life and their faith more deeply and feel appreciation for the present moment.
It's quite amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think, so for me, like as a non-Muslim, the thing for me was just that sense of, I guess, humility and feeling quite vulnerable by not being able to have food and having to go about my daily business. And so, like, through that, it really made me appreciate what I have the rest of the time, but also made me appreciate what I had. Even though I wasn't eating food, I was more appreciative of having fresh air or my surroundings or whatever. So there's something that's quite humbling about that, I think.
You feel almost as a bit of a reset.
Yeah,
in some respects.
I think in lots of ways, but I think, everything that we do at Think Productive is about how people think about their work, how people prioritise their work, and also the kind of work-life balance aspect of that. And obviously food is such a major part of people's lives. So
you talked about being irritable and grumpy during fasting. How did you overcome that? And I suppose, did it teach you something about yourself?
So there was a few instances where, like, I've got to admit, the blood sugar was low, and it was 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was trying to have conversations with work colleagues about this needs to be done or that needs to be done, and just found myself just getting very sort of irritable.
Did you find yourself putting them in a headlock, maybe
not
giving wedgies?
Quite a headlock, but certainly just being a bit snappy and shouting, and I think not really shouting actually, but just that kind of grumpiness. And I think the thing that I learned from that was actually just to call that out and label it. So as soon as I realised that I was the reason for that was to do with the fasting, it would be I'm really sorry, I'm fasting, I'm really craving some food right now or whatever, and just really kind of externalising that so that people appreciated that, I guess.
Makes sense. Final thoughts then. So what have you learnt the most from your fasting experience?
Well, I suppose the first thing to say is the reaction that I got to it. So when it went on productivemuslim.com, I'd read the comments, and it would be there'd be someone in Wales, someone in Bosnia, someone in Abu Dhabi.
Muslims and non-Muslims alike?
I think there was a few non-Muslims, but mainly the Muslim community just around the world really kind of took to it, and that was just really lovely.
Wow.
And everyone was
that's what you're
doing.
doing.
A little
Fasting
bit of
3
that,
days.
but there's also a lot of people saying it's really nice that someone who's a non-Muslim is kind of willing
That's
to
good.
put himself out there
Absolutely.
and do that, and so for me, just the support that I received through that was just really touching. So that was probably the first thing. And then I think in terms of productivity, my big sort of lesson was, you only have a very limited amount of really sort of like quality attention. So because you know that later in the day you'll probably be a bit more sleepy or whatever, try and do the really difficult tasks in your day first.
At the beginning,
Get that stuff out of the way while you've got energy, and then maybe have a little nap in the afternoon.
That's a good tip. Siesta. Yeah.
Absolutely. Graham, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Please stay with us because there's a lot more we'd like to ask you. So time now for a short break. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you in a few minutes.